The moment I opened my eyes after the crash, I knew someone had decided I was in the way. I wasn't supposed to wake up. Not there, not then. But fate clearly had other plans, and apparently it wasn't quite finished with me. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because this isn't just a story. It's a warning. The first thing I remember was the smell. Gasoline, sharp and choking, thick in the back of my throat. The second thing was silence. An unnatural silence, the kind that follows disaster, heavy and absolute. The car was tilted at a sick angle, windshield shattered like cracked ice, my turquoise handbag crushed under the pedals. My seatbelt was jammed tight across my shoulder, refusing to release no matter how many times I clawed at the buckle. My right hand burned from broken glass. I don't know how long I hung there, trapped between the steering wheel and the wreckage, before the sound of sirens cut through the haze. "She's still breathing," a paramedic said. That word still lodged itself in my mind like a nail. Still. As if I wasn't supposed to be. They pulled me out with metal cutters, strapped me onto a gurney, and rushed me into the ambulance. Lights blurred. Voices shouted. Then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, 2 days had passed. I was in Sarasota Memorial Hospital, connected to more machines than I could count, every inch of me aching. My left arm was useless, my ribs felt cracked with every breath, and my head throbbed like someone had been hammering inside my skull. And there he was, Todd, my son, my only child, sitting in a chair by my bed, his eyes red as if he had been crying, his hand clasped over mine. "Mom," he whispered, his voice tight. "You scared us so badly." It sounded tender, comforting, almost convincing. But here's the thing, when you carry a child for 9 months, raise him alone after his father walks out, and sacrifice every ounce of yourself for decades, you learn to read him better than he reads himself. His hand was warm, but it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like performance. His expression wasn't grief. It was calculation. Todd was not the kind of man who dropped everything to sit at a hospital bed. He never canceled meetings for family. If he was here, there was something at stake. And as I lay there, weak and broken, I realized something chilling. Todd had everything to gain if I didn't make it, and everything to lose now that I had. But let me rewind a little, because the truth is, the accident didn't come out of nowhere. It began weeks earlier, in moments so small they could almost be mistaken for kindness. "Mom, you shouldn't be driving anymore," Todd said one morning, slipping my Subaru keys out of my purse like it was nothing. "Why don't you take my car instead? It's newer, safer. You'll be more comfortable." He smiled that salesman's smile, the one he used when pitching clients at his investment firm. I hesitated. My old car wasn't glamorous, but it was reliable. Still, Todd insisted, pressing the heavier key fob into my palm. "Do it for me, okay? Humor me." Too much concern too suddenly. Too rehearsed. Then came the paperwork. He brought me highlighted documents, slid across the kitchen island like they were harmless. "Everyone your age needs a living trust," he said. "It's just being responsible. You don't want to leave things messy, do you?" What he didn't say was that he had already drafted himself as sole beneficiary, or that he'd added clauses that gave him access to my accounts in case of emergency circumstances. Circumstances like, say, his mother conveniently no longer being around to protest. I didn't sign. I delayed. I hired a lawyer to review it. And Todd didn't like delays. The crash happened on a Thursday afternoon. Rain had just started slicking the Florida roads. I was taking the route I always took, Osprey Avenue, past the real estate office and down toward the bay. The turn was ordinary routine, but suddenly the steering locked, stiff as concrete. The brake pedal sank deeper than it ever had before, unresponsive, empty. The car spun. The world blurred. Then came the violent crunch of metal, and blackness swallowed me whole. Now here I was staring at my son, while machines beeped in steady rhythm around me. "Everything's under control," Todd said softly. "You just focus on healing. Don't worry about a thing. I'll handle it all." Handle it all. Too smooth. Too ready. Too wrong. I might have been lying in a hospital bed, my body shattered and my mind foggy from painkillers, but one truth rang louder than every monitor in that room. Someone had tried to erase me, and the person holding my hand knew exactly why. That was the day I stopped being just a mother. I became a problem. And problems, well, someone had already tried once to solve me. This was just the beginning. Stay with me because the next voice you'll hear, the one that turned everything upside down again, didn't come from Todd. It came from a nurse named Emily. And her one casual remark would change everything. My name is Margaret Walker, 70 years old, widow, Sarasota, Florida. On paper, I have what most people would call a good life. Comfortable savings, a waterfront condo, some rental properties, a modest portfolio left over from my late husband's contracting business. Nothing extravagant, but enough to live without worrying about coupons or late bills. And yet somehow that enough became too tempting for someone else. My biggest mistake? I'll tell you. Letting my son handle the paperwork. My second biggest? Trusting him with my calendar. Todd was always ambitious. Even as a boy, he wanted more allowance, more gadgets, more praise. If I said no, he'd find a way to get a neighbor to lend it, or he'd talk a teacher into giving him an extension. Clever, persuasive, but slippery. His father called it charm. I called it practice. As an adult, Todd turned that charm into a career in finance. He wore sharp suits, quoted motivational podcasts, and spoke in buzzwords like leverage and optimization. He was the kind of man who could convince you that paying triple rent was an investment in your lifestyle. His friends thought he was brilliant. I thought he was always 3 steps ahead of disaster. But to outsiders, Todd was the picture of a devoted son. He showed up at church luncheons with my arm tucked into his, carried my bags at Publix like some Southern gentleman, even posted photos of us on his social media with captions like, "Taking care of Mom, because she took care of me first." The comments rolled in. "You're such a good son, Todd. She raised a gentleman." What they didn't see were the highlighted documents he slid across my kitchen island. Trust papers with his name circled. Insurance updates filed without my consent. "Just sign here, Mom. It's routine. Always routine. Always urgent." He cloaked control in kindness. "You don't need to worry about errands," he said, waving away my car keys. "Let me handle it. You should be relaxing, enjoying life. You don't need to go through all that paperwork," he insisted, reaching for my mail before I could. "I'll organize it. Keep things efficient." Efficient. That was his favorite word. Todd always loved efficiency. Guess he figured out a way to speed up my retirement. And here's the bitter truth. I let him. Not because I trusted him completely, but because I was tired. After decades of doing everything alone, raising him when his father walked out, keeping the lights on by working nights and weekends, there's a part of you that wants to believe you've earned a little rest, that someone else can carry the load for once. But rest is dangerous when the person carrying the load is watching the clock, waiting for you to fall behind. I'd see glimpses of the real Todd when he thought I wasn't paying attention. A glance at my checkbook balance. A little too much curiosity about my will. A smile when the topic of planning ahead came up in conversation. Not the smile of a son caring for his mother. The smile of a man running numbers. I should have trusted my instincts sooner. But instincts are easy to ignore when they're wrapped in bouquets and "I love you, Mom" texts. Looking back, all the signs were there. The sudden obsession with my safety. The push for me to switch cars. The paperwork time just before the accident. Todd wasn't just planning for my future. He was planning for one without me in it. And that's where this story truly begins. There's a certain kind of kindness that doesn't feel right. It's too polished, too constant, too deliberate. That's what Todd's attention had started to feel like. As if he was playing the role of devoted son in a movie, hitting every line exactly on cue. It began with the car. "Mom, you really shouldn't be driving the Subaru anymore," he said one Saturday, leaning against my kitchen counter in his perfectly ironed shirt, sipping his overpriced cold brew. He said it so casually, as if he were commenting on the weather. "It's old. The brakes are outdated. And if something happened to you on the road..." He let the sentence trail off, unfinished. That's how Todd liked to work. Leave just enough silence so the other person filled in the worst possibility themselves. I frowned. "Todd, that Subaru has been with me for 10 years. It runs fine." He slid another set of keys across the counter, slow and deliberate. A shiny black fob with the emblem of his new luxury sedan gleamed under the morning light. "Just humor me. Take my car. It's safer. Built-in lane assist, Automatic braking, collision warnings, all the bells and whistles. Please. I'll handle the Subaru. The way he said it, I almost felt rude for resisting. Almost. But something about the gesture nagged at me. Todd had never been generous without reason. He wasn't the kind of man who gave up the driver's seat, literally or figuratively. Yet here he was practically begging me to use his car. The second push came with the insurance. You know, Mom, he said one afternoon while sorting my mail, something I hadn't asked him to do. You're at an age where things happen. Wouldn't it be smart to update your policy? Just in case. You wouldn't want me drowning in paperwork if something unexpected came along. He said it while tapping a glossy folder against the counter. The kind of sales packet you'd expect from a real estate office, not your own child. What's wrong with my current policy? I asked. Nothing, he said quickly. Too quickly. It's just outdated. We can do better. This one's more efficient. Peace of mind, Mom. He smiled a little too wide. His eyes, though, weren't on me. They were on the signature line at the bottom of the form. Peace of mind. Whose peace? Then came the conversation about the will. It was wrapped in a joke but sharp enough to cut. Mom, Todd said as we sorted through old family photos. Do you realize how chaotic things would be if something ever happened to you? Who gets what, where it all goes? It'd be a nightmare. You should really finalize your will. I raised an eyebrow. You seem awfully invested in my future. Or should I say my lack of one? He laughed, but it sounded rehearsed. It's just paperwork, Mom. Everyone does it. You don't want things messy. Think of it as efficiency. Efficiency. That word again. It had been his favorite since college. He once told me proudly that efficiency was about removing obstacles. And I couldn't shake the cold thought that maybe to Todd I had become one. The older I get, the more I trust my instincts. And mine were screaming. Every bouquet he brought, every let me handle that offer, every soft reminder about planning, it all pointed in one direction. Todd's kindness wasn't kindness at all. It was preparation. I looked at him that evening, really looked at him. At the confident way he flipped through the papers, the casual way he slipped my checkbook into his bag. The easy way he smiled whenever he said the word planning. He wasn't just managing my errands. He was managing me. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Todd didn't want to take care of me. He wanted to take over. He cloaked control in flowers. He dressed manipulation in warm smiles. He masked ambition with peace of mind. And I, tired from years of carrying the world on my back, almost let him. Because letting go sounded like relief. But relief in the wrong hands is dangerous. And Todd's hands had never been steady. Thursday began like any other. The kind of Florida day that fools you into comfort. By noon the sky was blue. By 2 o'clock, thunder rolled in from the Gulf, rain turning the streets into shining rivers. I'd finished the bank and pharmacy, then stopped at the market on Osprey Avenue. When I stepped back outside, Todd's luxury sedan waited in the downpour, sleek and polished, purring like a predator. My Subaru was at his place, supposedly getting its brakes checked. He had insisted. Mom, please, he'd said that morning, pushing the key fob into my hand. This car is safer. Trust me. I should have trusted my hesitation instead. The seatbelt fought me as I buckled it, tugging hard before clicking into place. A strange detail, but I brushed it off. I adjusted the mirrors, turned up the wipers, and pulled onto the familiar road along the bay. The storm thickened, drops hammering the windshield like thrown gravel. I leaned forward, peering through the blur. The curve ahead was one I had driven for decades. My hands knew it. My body relaxed, expecting routine. And then wrong. The steering wheel stiffened. Not slippery. Stiff. My arms strained, but it resisted, dragging wide. My pulse spiked. Brake. My foot pressed down. The pedal sank almost to the floor, loose, useless. I pumped once, twice. Nothing. God, no, I whispered. The guardrail surged closer. Beyond it, the bay churned black, whipped by wind. The seatbelt locked harder across my chest, ribs screaming. My turquoise bag had slid from the seat, spilling receipts and coins across the floor mat. One penny lodging under the brake pedal like a cruel joke. Lightning split the sky, a white flash that illuminated everything. The wet shine of the road, the desperate swing of my hands on a wheel that no longer belonged to me. The inevitable steel line of the rail waiting to catch me. Impact. It came in layers, sounds colliding like a cruel orchestra. Tires shrieked, metal folded, glass shattered. The airbag detonated, slamming into me with a dusty punch that stole the air from my lungs. For a breathless moment I was weightless, suspended between pain and disbelief. Then silence crashed down, heavy and ringing. I dangled sideways, the belt of ice across my collarbone. Gasoline choked the air, sharp and sour. I clawed at the buckle, but my fingers slipped on glass. It refused to release. Somewhere through the hiss of rain I heard voices. Over here. A flashlight cut through the cracked windshield. She's still breathing, someone said. Still. As if that wasn't supposed to be the case. Metal screamed as the jaws of life bit into the frame. The door warped, then tore open. Hands reached in, steady but urgent. Stay calm, ma'am. We've got you. The belt finally snapped free, and the sudden freedom felt almost worse, like I might spill out of the world itself. They lifted me into the rain. Sirens roared. The ambulance swallowed me whole. Inside, speed and calm danced together. A cuff tightening on my arm, a monitor beeping, someone shouting vitals. Margaret, can you hear me? Yes, I croaked. Barely. You're safe. Stay awake for me. Safe. The word floated above me, thin as smoke. I wanted to believe it. But in the back of my mind, another thought screamed louder. This was never an accident. 2 days later, I opened my eyes in Sarasota Memorial. The ceiling tiles blurred. My ribs stabbed with every shallow breath. My left arm was useless, strapped against my chest. A line of bruises cut across me exactly where the seatbelt had bitten. And there was Todd. My son. My only child. He sat in a chair, his suit jacket folded neatly on his lap. His face was arranged into sorrow, eyes reddened in just the right shade, hand clasped gently around mine. Mom, he whispered, squeezing. We thought we lost you. You scared us so badly. He always used that word when he wanted cover. His thumb stroked over my knuckles, but his gaze slid toward the tray table, where a nurse had left a clear envelope marked personal items. My keys, my earrings, the blue tag from my condo. He looked away too quickly, but not before I noticed. Everything's under control, he said, his voice soft, practiced. I've spoken to the insurance and an attorney. You don't have to worry about a thing. Just rest. Under control. Paperwork aligned. His words were meant to soothe, but they pressed down colder than any drip. I closed my eyes. Not because I was tired, but because I couldn't look at him without seeing it. The Subaru in his garage, the luxury sedan he'd forced into my hands, the steering wheel turned to stone, the brake that sank to nothing, the seatbelt that bit and wouldn't let go. Someone had prepared this. Someone had expected me to be in absence. And Todd, the man holding my hand, looked very much like someone who had already planned for me not to be there. Hospitals have a smell. Not just disinfectant and latex, but something heavier. Like stillness bottled and sprayed down every hallway. I spent hours drifting in and out of that smell, unsure of the day or the hour, until a new voice cut through the haze. Good morning, Mrs. Walker. Time to check that for. I blinked awake to a pair of sharp blue eyes framed by dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. The badge clipped to her scrubs read Emily Carter, RN. She was younger than Todd, late 20s maybe, but carried herself with the brisk confidence of someone who had already seen more than most people could stand. You gave the whole department a scare, she said, adjusting my line. That was one nasty wreck. Wreck? I echoed, my throat raw. That's what they're calling it? Emily smiled faintly. What else would we call it? She checked my monitors, but her tone made it sound less like a question and more like an opening. I studied her. Nurses see everything. The rushed whispers. The unguarded moments. The truth people let slip when they think no one important is listening. If anyone here knew more than the official line, it would be her. Strange thing, she continued casually. My brother's a paramedic. He was on your call. She lowered her voice, leaning closer. He said it didn't look like a normal accident. My skin prickled. What do you mean? Emily glanced toward the door, then back at me. Brakes intact. No skid marks. Airbags late to deploy. And get this, someone called 911 from your phone before you were even found. Weird, right? The room seemed to tilt. I clutched the blanket tighter. Before I was found? She nodded. 2:49 p.m. Exact timestamp. But when the crew arrived, your phone was in the glove box. Screen cracked, locked. Doesn't add up. My heart thudded harder than the monitor could keep up with. Todd had left my phone in the car that morning, insisting he'd organize my contacts. My fingers tightened around the sheet until my knuckles whitened. Emily must have seen my face drain of color because her tone softened. I'm not saying anything for sure. Just, I've been a nurse long enough to know when something smells off. And this? Smells off. For the first time since the crash, I felt less alone. The days blurred together. Blood draws, beeping machines, the metallic taste of oxygen in my mouth. Todd hovered, bringing flowers, fiddling with the blinds, whispering about how everything was handled. But every time he left the room, Emily slipped in with a word, a fact, a question that kept me anchored. She noticed things others didn't. The way Todd always arrived with papers in his bag. The way he stood guard when doctors discussed my care, answering questions before I could. The way he reminded staff that he held my medical directive, something I didn't remember signing. You trust him? She asked one evening while checking my blood pressure. He's my son, I whispered. That's not what I asked. Her gaze was steady, not cruel, just clear. It forced me to admit the truth I'd been pushing down. Trust and obligation are not the same thing. When I was moved to a private room, Emily was the one who wheeled me down the hall. You'll have more quiet here, she said. But quiet isn't always safety. Don't forget that. She slipped a folded paper into my hand as she adjusted my blanket. Later, when I was alone, I opened it. A phone number. Beneath it, 3 words: call if needed. The night before discharge, Todd stood by my bed, his smile tight. Mom, I'll bring the documents tomorrow. Just a few things that need updating, nothing for you to worry about. His words should have soothed me. Instead, I heard Emily's voice echoing. That's not what I asked. I looked at Todd, my son, for the first time. I didn't see a caretaker. I saw someone who had rehearsed every line. And I knew then that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Someone else had noticed the cracks in his act. Her name was Emily. And thanks to her, I had proof that my instincts were right. Someone had tried to get rid of me. And if Todd thought I was going to just sign my name away and disappear quietly, he was about to learn something new about his mother. Recovery is supposed to be about rest. Mine was about restraint, holding back my hand from signing the papers Todd kept sliding across the tray table. Power of attorney. Updated directive. It's just paperwork, Mom. Everyone does it. His voice was gentle, but his eyes were fixed on the signature line. I smiled, feigned confusion from the pain meds, and said I'd read them, when the calendar stopped melting. He didn't like that answer. Emily visited in the evenings, quiet but sharp. If you need distance, don't go back to him, she whispered. Then she handed me an envelope. Inside, the paramedics' run sheet. One line nearly stopped my heart. 2:49 p.m. Incoming call to patient's phone while occupant trapped. My phone had been locked in the glove box. I hadn't touched it. Someone else had. When discharge came, Emily arranged a transfer to Savannah. Officially rehab. In truth, it was escape. My friend Claire, a retired paralegal, met me at her guest house with a pot of coffee and a stack of files. 2 weeks before the crash, Claire said, tapping her laptop. Someone requested your will. 3 days before? An insurance writer, Todd listed as emergency contact. And here's service ticket on the sedan. Brake line. Seatbelt test. No invoice. By the next day, a mechanic confirmed it. Brake master cylinder tampered. Buckle casing marked by tools. Data recorder showing 0 brake pressure before impact. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was evidence. Meanwhile, Todd's messages piled up. Where are you? We need signatures. You're not thinking clearly. Claire responded once, lawyerly. All communication through counsel. His concern soured into frustration. I hired Virgil, a retired trooper with the patience of stone. Within days, he pulled surveillance. Todd's assistant sitting in my car with a tool case, then leaving the garage after hours. A shop manager remembered a quiet job, billed to a corporate account. No receipt. Another piece for the folder. Emily called one night during her break. You okay? She asked. Better than I was. Worse than I'll be. She laughed softly. That's a good place to be. Claire kept building the wall around me. Bank accounts locked, signatures frozen, new passwords. When Todd tried to trigger an appraisal of my condo, the request bounced. His efficiency was finally failing him. By the end of the month, the trail was clear. A rush of planning paperwork with his fingerprints all over it. A car tampered with just enough to look like fate. Attempts to move my assets while I lay drugged in a hospital bed. Todd hadn't expected me to recover. But I had. And I was stronger than he remembered. If you're watching this, don't scroll. Because recovery was just the prologue. The reckoning comes next. 6 weeks after the crash, I didn't look like the woman Todd thought he had carefully removed from his path. Gone was the soft hair he remembered brushing past my shoulders, replaced by a sharp bob streaked with silver. Gone was the jewelry he'd seen me wear at Sunday dinners, replaced by a simple band and a watch too plain to be noticed. Glasses framed my face, not for eyesight but for invisibility. In the mirror of Claire's guest house in Savannah, I tested the expression over and over. Quiet, polite, forgettable. I was no longer Margaret Walker, the woman Todd knew as his mother. I was Margaret Davis, consultant. A name Claire had built with precision: tax ID, mailing address, enough paperwork to survive a casual audit. Nothing fraudulent, just armor. Todd believed I was tucked away in rehab, slowly fading into retirement. That illusion was my shield. Returning to Sarasota felt like walking back into a play where everyone thought my role had been cut. The airport buzzed, but I walked through it unseen. That was the point. When people underestimate you, they stop noticing you. And when they stop noticing, you can move freely. My house was on the market. Todd had already signed preliminary appraisal forms, spoken to buyers, even hinted to friends that he'd soon be upgrading. I hadn't lost my property. Not legally. But he was practicing possession like a child wearing his father's shoes. Claire had coached me carefully. Don't confront yet. Let him believe. People who think they've won make mistakes. So I didn't storm the house. Instead, I rented a small furnished apartment across town, under the name Davis. Neutral beige walls, a view of a parking lot. Nothing memorable. Perfect. From there I could move unseen. Virgil, my investigator, installed discreet cameras near the rental Todd was living in. Within 3 nights the footage began. Todd unloading boxes after midnight, wine crates, electronics, new golf clubs. Living large on money that wasn't his. He was celebrating a victory he hadn't actually secured. The first step was the law firm. Claire had booked an appointment under my new identity. Just another client in a gray blazer. I sat in the lobby flipping through a finance magazine while Todd strutted past, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, the appraisal's moving fast, he told someone loudly. The estate will be fully under my control soon. Basically a done deal. He didn't even glance at me. That was the test and he failed it. Inside, the attorney reviewed the freezes and injunctions Claire had filed quietly on my behalf. Your assets are protected, he assured me. No changes can proceed without your explicit authorization. Step 1. Fortress walls restored. But paper shields weren't enough. I wanted to see him up close to measure the man who thought efficiency was the same as destiny. So I walked into the bank where he had filed my appraisal. The manager, used to Claire's referrals, greeted me warmly. Todd was already inside. He looked up, expecting deference. Instead, he saw only a woman in plain clothes and glasses, holding a folder. I'm here regarding the Walker estate, I said, voice steady. I represent a party with interest. He blinked. Dismissed me. Turned back to his conversation with the manager. Perfect. The less he noticed, the closer I could get. Back at my apartment, I replayed Virgil's clips of Todd's assistant slipping into the garage after hours, carrying a tool case. I studied the mechanics report again. Tool marks on the buckle, brake pressure anomalies, tampering on the master cylinder. Facts cold and sharp. Todd wasn't just careless. He was deliberate. And deliberate men believe they are invincible, until they trip over their own confidence. That evening I stood by the window, city lights blurring through the glass. Todd thought he'd erased me. He thought I was lying in a bed somewhere, waiting to be signed away on a dotted line. But I was already here. Watching. Listening. Rebuilding. If you're still with me, don't scroll. The mask is on, the stage is set. What Todd doesn't know yet is that the next act belongs to me. Todd always thought paperwork was his weapon. He wrapped every scheme in neat signatures and official stamps, convinced no one would look too closely. If he wanted a battlefield of forms and files, I would meet him there, with better ammunition. Claire and I built a binder that could have broken a lesser desk. Tabs for evidence. The paramedic run sheet with that 249 call, the mechanic's report of tampered brakes, the PI photos of his assistant sneaking into my garage with a tool case, copies of insurance riders and updated directives with forged versions of my signature. Every piece had a date, a witness, a chain of custody. No drama. Just receipts. The first shots were quiet. A fraud alert filed with the bank. A hold request to the Insurance Special Investigation Unit. A short letter to the State Revenue Office noting unusual vehicle service transactions. Nothing loud, but each one left a paper trail Todd couldn't erase. Then came the meeting. Claire scheduled it under the pretense of final estate signing at a downtown notary office. On the invite list, Todd, his attorney, the bank manager handling my appraisal, and a representative from the insurer. He thought it was his coronation. I arrived last, binder in hand. This time no disguise, no glasses. Just me. Todd's face drained. He masked it quickly with a smile. "Mom, you look better. You shouldn't be stressing yourself." I set the binder on the table. Stress? No. I'm here to clarify. Claire opened to tab 1. Timing. New insurance rider 3 days before the crash. Will request 2 weeks before. Directive updates while Mrs. Walker was medicated. Tab 2. Mechanic's affidavit. Brakes disabled, seatbelt buckle casing tampered, restraint system abnormal hold. Tab 3. Side-by-side signatures. Forensic handwriting analysis confirms these two are not hers. Tab 4. PI report. Photos of his assistant entering my garage time-stamped. Copies of shop access logs showing after-hours vendor entries. Todd tried to laugh it off. This is ridiculous. My mother is confused, manipulated. I leaned forward. My voice was steady. Surprise, Todd. I'm not just back. I brought receipts. The room tilted after that. The bank manager cleared his throat and announced that all beneficiary changes and appraisals were on hold pending review. The insurer's rep scribbled notes, promising escalation to their fraud unit. Even the notary frowned at one of the stamped directives. This seal, she said, wasn't in service on the date shown. Todd's mask slipped. You're turning this into a circus. We could have handled it quietly. We did, I said. You just weren't invited. When the meeting adjourned, Todd sat frozen, watching doors close around him that he'd once walked through freely. His field, his forms, his systems, all now weapons turned against him. Walking out into the glass corridor, I caught my reflection. The same woman he thought he'd erased, now carrying the binder that told the truth he never planned to face. And I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The meeting at the notary's office was just the opening shot. Todd walked out pale, clutching his briefcase like it was a life raft. But the truth was already slipping through his fingers. Paper trails don't vanish just because you stop believing in them. By Monday, the first cracks had spread. The bank froze all activity on my estate accounts. Their compliance department flagged every transaction Todd had tried to push through. Beneficiary updates, property appraisals, even an attempted wire transfer from one of my CDs. All suspended pending investigation. For Todd, money that once flowed like water had turned to stone. Tuesday brought the insurer's escalation notice. Their special investigation unit opened a file on possible fraudulent rider activity. I didn't need to be told what that meant. I'd worked in offices long enough to know the tone of corporate dread when liability was in play. Todd's name was listed as primary contact, a line item that now read like a spotlight. Claire kept me updated as letters went out. Fraud referrals, preservation requests, subpoenas pending. Each one was another domino tip just far enough to wobble the next. Virgil, my PI, called it death by paperwork. Meanwhile, Todd tried charm. He left voicemails dripping with faux concern. Mom, this is all a misunderstanding. We should sit down, just the two of us. They're confusing normal planning with fraud. You don't understand how these things work. And finally, the desperate plea. You're destroying your own family. Is that what you want? I didn't answer. Silence is a kind of language, and he was finally learning to hear it. But the real fallout wasn't in letters or voicemails. It was in faces. At the bank, the manager who once greeted Todd like a valued client now kept his tone clipped professional. Pending internal review, was all he'd say. At the insurer's office, his calls were routed to voicemail. Staff spoke in the careful cadence of people who know they're being recorded. Even his attorney looked strained when Claire forwarded a copy of the mechanic's affidavit. Lawyers don't like clients who come with tool marks and forged signatures. Reputation doesn't crumble in a courtroom. It crumbles in lobbies, hallways, break rooms, when people lower their voices as you pass, when invitations stop arriving, when doors close without explanation. Todd was beginning to live in that silence. For me, the shift was physical. I could breathe again. My ribs still ached from the crash, but each inhale carried less fear and more resolve. The woman who'd woken in a hospital bed tethered to machines was gone. What remained was someone Todd had never met. His mother with receipts, with witnesses, with resolve sharpened to steel. Claire poured us tea one night in Savannah. You realize, she said, we've moved past defense. You're not just protecting yourself anymore. You're dismantling him. I stirred honey into my cup calm. I didn't start this game, but I'll finish it. The next domino was public. Todd's assistant, the one Virgil had filmed sneaking into my garage, resigned suddenly from Todd's firm. She'd been subpoenaed for a deposition, and apparently her loyalty didn't stretch far enough to cover tool marks and late-night garage visits. The news spread quietly at first, then louder. Sarasota isn't a big city. Whispers move faster than official memos. By Thursday, I overheard a teller at the grocery store say, "Isn't he the one under investigation for messing with his mom's car?" Not a headline yet, but close. Todd finally showed up at my apartment building one evening, unannounced. He looked smaller somehow, the sharp suit hanging loose, his hair too carefully combed, like he'd practiced confidence in the mirror and lost it in the parking lot. "Mom," he said, voice raw. "Please, can we talk?" I stood in the doorway, not inviting him in. "We are talking," I said. "This has gotten out of control. The bank, the insurance company, they're twisting things. You don't know the whole story." I held up the binder, the one with tabs and affidavits and photos. "I know enough stories to fill a courtroom, Todd. The difference is mine come with exhibits." His mouth opened, then closed. He had no script for this. "You always taught me to plan," I said. "To be prepared. You forgot the part where plans built on lies collapse." He tried one last card. "You're my mother. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means I raised you to know better," I said softly. "And you chose worse." I shut the door before he could answer. If you're still watching, don't scroll. Families break in whispers, but they shatter in silence. And Todd was about to learn that the loudest silence is the one that comes when every system he trusted stops answering his calls. Freedom didn't arrive with confetti. Came in small envelopes. On a quiet Tuesday, 3 letters landed in my mailbox like tidy bookends on the past. The bank's compliance unit confirmed all unauthorized actions had been reversed, and my estate access was restricted to the account holder only. The insurer's special investigation unit notified me their case had moved to active review, and that any payouts tied to the rider were frozen. And from the state, a short note. My referrals were received, documentation preserved. No victory parade. Just systems finally doing what they should have done the first time. Sometimes justice is a stamp, not a gavel. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Because if anyone has ever tried to efficiently remove you from your own life, I need you to hear what comes next. I kept my life small on purpose. I sold the waterfront condo Todd had already measured for drapes and moved to a cottage near the coast. 1 story, wide doors, a kitchen with a window that faces the sunrise. In the backyard, I planted tomatoes in a raised bed. I watered with my left hand because the right still argued with the scar tissue. It was clumsy and perfect. On my first morning there, I baked cinnamon muffins and set 3 plates on the table. 1 for me. 1 for the woman who refused to ignore her instincts. And 1 for the part of me that had believed kindness must always mean surrender. Then I stacked 2 plates in the cupboard and ate the third while the ocean exhaled behind the dunes. Freedom tastes like cinnamon when you've earned it. I didn't disappear. I rebuilt. Claire became my co-trustee. Because a good friend with a sharp pen is stronger than any title. Virgil stayed on a modest retainer, not because I expected trouble, but because I respect preparedness. And Emily, sweet, stubborn Emily. I set up a scholarship in her name for nurses who catch what others miss. The first recipient sent a thank you note written in crooked block letters. I want to be the kind of nurse who saves people twice. Me too, kid. Me too. The fallout for Todd unfolded the way winter comes to Florida, slow, then all at once. The bank closed doors he assumed were automatic. The insurer stopped answering as a courtesy and started writing as a record. His assistant resigned, then cooperated. The shop's vendor account audit hit his inbox like a cold wave. He called occasionally. The voicemails changed tone over time. Swagger to injury, injury to innocence, innocence to accusation, accusation to nostalgia. I saved one and deleted the rest. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're oxygen. When he appeared at my gate one afternoon, I stepped onto the porch and stayed there. The sun made him squint. Truth does that. Mom, he said, voice less polished than I'd ever heard it. Can we fix this? There's nothing to fix, I said. There's only what happened and what happens next. He nodded at the binder under my arm, then stared past me at the tidy little house I chose instead of the stage he'd arranged. What happens next, then? You write a letter, I said. To the people you pressured and lied to. You tell the truth, not your version of it. You reimburse every expense I incurred defending myself. You agree to counseling not as a performance but as a requirement. And you don't contact me until those things are done. After that we talk. Not as a negotiation. As a consequence. He bristled, then deflated. The door didn't slam in his face. It just stayed closed. Some stories need a neat redemption arc, mine needs a safe perimeter. I restructured my will not out of spite, but out of clarity. The foundation now holds most of what I own. A simple mission. Small grants to first responders, legal aid for seniors facing paperwork pressure, and emergency funds for those whose families confuse inheritance with schedule. Emily sent a photo from the hospital break room. 3 nurses around a sheet cake iced with a crooked heart and the words "Thank you, M.W." They asked what it stood for, she wrote. I said meant well. Also Margaret Walker. I found a rhythm. Physical therapy in the morning. A walk to the water by noon. Phone calls after lunch. One to Mrs. Chun at City Planning, she likes to talk roses. Another to a woman from church whose son keeps telling her everyone does it about a stack of forms. Not today, they don't. When the idea of fear knocked, I opened the door and gave it a chore. Count the pelicans, I told it. You can stay if you're useful. Most days it leaves by afternoon. One evening I got a text from an unknown number. I'm sorry. Letters coming. No name attached. Apologies are lighter than paper and heavier than gold. I let it sit there and didn't answer. Healing isn't revenge. It's design. In the fall, Emily drove down to see the water. We sat on the porch with iced tea and watched 2 teenagers thread their bicycles between the mailboxes. Do you ever wish it had gone differently? She asked. Of course, I said. But wishing is a poor handyman. Planning does better work. She laughed, tucked her hair behind her ear, and looked at the binder on the side table. You going to keep that forever? No, I said. But I'll keep what it taught me. Trust your eyes. Document your feelings like facts, because sometimes feelings are just facts in a different tense. I don't know how Todd's story ends. I know how mine does. With a sunrise and a gate that closes softly, and a name on a foundation letterhead that means something to people I will never meet. And with a voice that didn't vanish when someone decided it should. If you're still here, thank you. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Then tell me the moment you stopped letting someone else narrate your life. Because here's the last secret I learned on the other side of the crash. Sometimes the only way to win isn't by breaking someone else. It's by refusing to let them write you out. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well on your terms.